welcome back to A Little Bit Humans Tea After Dark. I am really excited for today's episode because I am not going to be sitting behind a camera talking to myself like a weirdo. I am going to be joined by A Little Bit Human writer Rachel Green, and we're going to be talking about horror movies, particularly how horror can actually help with certain mental health illnesses, depression, grief, anxiety. Right up my alley because I kind of suffer from all of those. So I am super excited to dive into the topic. For today's tea, I am drinking Rooted Earth Farm Goddess Herbal Tea. How fitting for two goddesses who will be talking about horror movies. It's made with a ton of shit, to be honest with you, a lot of herbs that I can't pronounce. It's really good though, highly recommended. You can check out their website. It's made in Maine. And it is great for balance, nourishment, anxiety, which I suffer from immensely. So I have been drinking loads of this tea and it's amazing. I feel like a goddess. With that said, let's dive into the interview with Rachel Green on the comfort of horror, how scary movies can impact our mental health. Hey everybody, welcome to Tea After Dark. As I mentioned, I am joined today with Rachel Green. Rachel is a writer for A Little Bit Human, a fellow New Yorker, and a fellow horror buff. I'm so excited that she's on the show because we are going to dive into this really amazing topic that Rachel wrote this fantastic article on how horror movies are actually good for our mental health. Hi Rachel, thank you for joining. And like I said, I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic.
Hi, thank you. I'm so glad I get to talk about horror for a professional reason instead of just going on about it for no reason like I usually do.
Right. And like one of your friends, it's like, I get it already.
Exactly.
So I'm going to ask to start it off, have to ask the first question, what is your favorite scary movie?
Okay, so I was thinking about this in preparation because I had a flood of different ideas.
You visualize me saying that?
To go back to my roots, I would say The Shining is probably the first one I saw that it was like, oh, I love this. I need to be terrified more. So that was the one that stuck with me. But then more recently, I'm really into Mike Flanagan and all of his
Oh,
movies and his show
love
Hill
him.
House and Bly Manor and all of that. So
Yeah, I can't wait. I forgot the name of it, but he's coming out with something about Edgar Allan Poe. So I'm really excited for that. Which of his work have you loved the most so far?
I was a huge fan of Midnight Mass that just came out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but then Hill House has a special place in my heart because that's also one of my favorite books by Shirley Jackson. So
Yep. Yeah, that's great. I read that and then I just finished We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Like last night I just finished it and that was really good too.
that's still on my list. I've read a bunch of her other things, but not We Have Always Lived in the Castle yet. But
Yeah, it's a good one. It's not as like Hill House freaked me out while reading it, just the way she describes the house and the surroundings and the character development and the eerie things. It doesn't the castle doesn't quite have that same fear, but it's interesting, just the whole story and the main characters and all. So you'll like it. It's good.
yeah.
So on your article that you wrote, what inspired you to write about mental health and horror? Because it's not something that typically people would pair, mental alleviating depression and anxiety symptoms and pair it with horror. So it's a really interesting take. What inspired you to write that?
So it was kind of like a personal question, or I guess. And I originally thought that this was going to end up being an article about people with mental illness gravitate to horror or something. Like that's what it was going to be. But then it turned out that it's actually something that helps people, whether or not they have mental illness. Like it's a good mental health tool for everyone. So I was surprised to find that out.
Yeah, I was going to say, you obviously did quite a bit of research. Did any of the findings kind of surprise you? Did you figure going into writing something like this that there was going to be some scientific evidence supporting the theory that it's good for us?
So I wasn't sure if there would be any research on this. I thought maybe I would just find other people with the same anecdotal experience as me. But then there has been actually, like, I found multiple studies that were like trying to understand this phenomenon, mostly from the approach of like, why the hell do people watch horror and like it?
There's a lot of like subgenres to horror, you know, a lot of different takes on it. Is there, for you specifically, when you're looking to watch something and maybe looking to watch something you had a bad day, or as we do, you know, we kind of gravitate towards the genre, you and me particularly, and we've talked about this, it just makes us feel better. Is there a specific subgenre of horror that scares you the most? It's like your go-to. Like for me, I love found footage. The jump scares always get me on those, and I just find them really interesting. Because when I was younger, I was very obsessed with Blair Witch. It came out when I was like 10, and it was one of those films I wasn't supposed to see but saw anyway, kind of thing. That kind of started my found footage craze, and to this day I still love it. Is there like a specific subgenre for you that you like the most?
So for me, I think anything haunting, like a haunted house, or if there's just a ghost involved, I don't know, it's something
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
because it's a like has that psychological horror vibe, because it's usually like the main character has some sort of like psychological issue they're struggling with, or a relationship issue, and then it kind of manifests in this ghost story. And that's cool. And then there's also some good jump scares with that too.
Yeah, I love Supernatural as well. And I know like Hill House, going back to Mike Flanagan, that was a really good example of it was really well done, that show. It was scary but not over the top, and it wasn't corny scary. You know, they
Yeah.
really placed those jump scares well. And really made you like, not because like most movies you can kind of expect it. The music starts and you just kind of know that this is what's happening. Particularly that car scene where they're in the front seat and the two sisters are arguing. You had no idea whatsoever that there was something about to jump. And I love that because somebody who watches horror as much as I do, I always know when something's going to happen. I know immediately this is going to be a jump scare. Caught me completely off guard. It was so good.
I agree. Because I'll also like, with a lot of, especially with a lot of ghost movies, I find there's like just kind of this rhythm of the movie that I'm like, all right, so there's going to be a jump scare here, here, and here. And like
Yep.
yeah, it follows this pattern. So yeah, that's what one of the things I like about Mike Flanagan is he kind of like disrupts that and will mix it up.
Yeah, yeah, I love him. I don't know if you saw Hush, but that has
Yeah.
Kate Siegel, and that was such a great movie. Especially just the resourcefulness of she's deaf in the movie, and the things that she kind of used around her to, you know, evade her attacker was amazing. I could talk about Mike Flanagan all day. I love him so much. I'm so glad you love him too. So back to the article though, you gave a lot of really great insight into specifically how horror movies are good for us and the fight or flight. For you personally though, like how do you feel when you're watching horror? What specifically sticks out to you on a personal level in terms of it making you feel good and sort of aiding in your mental health?
So I think it depends on the movies, because so for some that actually scare me, then it's like I get like that fight or flight response, kind of like I'm like alert and on edge. And then at the end, like calm, like that relief, feeling of relief.
Yeah.
But then with like something that's maybe not so scary, either because it's like intentionally campy or it's just maybe too predictable, it's still like kind of cozy and comforting. Like it's just, I don't know, nice to like come home to that at the end of the day, even if it's not gonna make me actually scared.
Yeah. I like to, well, you sort of honed in on the fact that when we watch scary movies, it's almost as if we're putting ourselves in a scary or dangerous situation, but without really doing so. So we have that physical reaction, but mentally we sort of know that we are in actually safe. So it's a really interesting phenomenon that like when you think of thrill seekers, people who love roller coasters and things like that, there is kind of a semblance of danger there. So they love that adrenaline and they love sort of that anticipation that they get while like before they, you know, jump off that cliff and or skydive or whatnot. With horror, though, we still get that same sensation without having to jump out of a plane. So it's really fascinating that our brains still we experience the same situations as somebody doing something so intense by just sitting on our couch and watching a movie, which is really cool. And yeah, that adrenaline after the fact, like when you're in the moment of getting scared, it's kind of unpleasant, but then it feels really good. Like it feels like very cathartic and you sort of just like release and you almost kind of laugh a little bit to the fact that something got you. And, back to that Hill House scene that I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I cannot believe I just freaking fell for that. Like, but that's what made it a really good jump scare. So you kind of brush it off too, and, afterwards, because you're not actually in danger. So I loved sort of that real like scientific approach in the psychology of understanding why we react the way we do, because it's just such a unique genre. You don't really get that with action, maybe a little, but not in the same way with horror. You're really on edge for most of the time.
So that's exactly like where the power of the genre comes in, is because it's triggering, like physically your body doesn't know the difference between the fact that it's fictional or like a real scary
Yeah.
scenario. So like you're having the actual fear response like at the physical level, but rationally, like the swamp monster isn't going to come out and get you. So you stay there, which is a way of like practicing emotional regulation. So you're learning to feel something without necessarily reacting or like just being driven by that emotion. And that like
Yeah.
carries over into so many other things in your life, even though it's like you're just sitting on a couch watching a movie, but you take that emotional regulation skill to like everything else. So in any moment of crisis, you're more likely to be able to like stay calm and clear-headed while you're there.
Especially with how you pinpointed the exposure therapy side of it, that people who do watch horror on a regular basis are sort of training themselves, for lack of a better word, to better prepare for when they are faced with something that in the moment might feel slightly dangerous. There's extreme cases, of course, but even just something like that typical day-to-day stress or anxiety, maybe taking a test at school or having to do something at work and give a presentation, I feel like it does kind of help us because we're constantly willingly, which sounds kind of weird, putting ourselves in situations where we're leveling and elevating that anxiety. So it does kind of make sense that people like us are probably a little bit more predisposed to handling some stressful situations a little bit better than some others. And I don't know if you saw this, but and this was a while ago, but I read an article that came out probably maybe like 6 months into the pandemic, that people that were watching horror were coping better with being like shelter in place and just kind of the scare of COVID-19 in general. And I remember thinking, well, I'm one of those people and I'm truly suffering. So Godspeed to anybody that is not watching horror, because that's kind of an insane statistic. But so I don't know if did you feel that at all during COVID? Like, did you like sort of up your level of horror movie watching, and did you feel that it helped you during the pandemic? Because I thought it was such a strange topic, but it makes sense. I mean, especially based on what you wrote.
It does. So I think I cite that study in the article, and it was really interesting because it was basically showing that like people who had watched horror, especially horror that's like related to like a pandemic or plague,
Yeah.
they felt like less like stressed out by the pandemic, like are better able to just like, all right, I'm going to make a plan and then we'll just be prepared and we're good. And I
Yeah.
definitely during the pandemic started watching a lot more horror. Reading, I was like, I'm gonna read all the Stephen King and I'm gonna watch like all the horror movies. And yeah. And it wasn't like an intentional choice at the time. It was just like, I don't know, it was natural
Something to
gravitating
do.
towards it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I like, so in the first episode that I shot, the pilot episode was centered around Friday the 13th, and there was a case that I covered, a true crime case, in which somebody sort of took it to the other extreme of horror movie. While you and I, it benefits us in ways. For others, it sort of does the opposite and has a negative impact. This particular individual killed somebody who was inspired by the Friday the 13th movies. He literally dressed up as Jason Voorhees. I mean, really terrifying. What are your thoughts about the opposite side of the spectrum when it impacts somebody sort of in a negative way? Of course, horror movies don't make people commit heinous acts by any accord. But is there something there in terms of that inspiration? Would they have done it if they weren't watching movies? What's your take on it?
So I would say, based on my non-qualified, unprofessional opinion, that it's more like this person had this pre-existing condition, and then this movie just for some reason appealed to them, and that image, especially because if you take someone like Jason, who's like such an iconic image, it's not just like some random B horror he found. This is like a major franchise, so it's like I don't know, a big popular image, I guess. And
Yeah.
but he could, if that didn't exist, he probably would have found something else to like graft onto if it wasn't for that one. So
Right, I know. Yeah. It's just like it's funny because then you back like the satanic panic and all of that where people were blaming the music they were listening to, and I know that was huge with Columbine where they were playing violent video games and they were listening to Marilyn Manson, and it was sort of all of these external environmental factors around them like horror movies were making them or inspiring them to do these horrible things, whereas I completely agree. I think it's both nature versus nurture. It's you can't possibly say that somebody is going to be that influenced by a movie or a video game without having be that predisposed character trait already within them to want make them want to do something terrible like that. So I
yeah,
agree.
exactly. And I would also say, like, because it can be so therapeutic and cathartic to watch horror, that it would be a genre that like appeals to people with mental illnesses, so they would be more likely to watch it. And then these are also the people, like, it's not like going to cure their mental illness, it's just like a cathartic release that they have, but it might not be enough to offset the fact that they want to like go commit mass murder. So like without actual therapy and treatment, it's not going to fix them.
Absolutely. No. I think what's great too about horror in terms of sort of aiding with our mental health is it definitely touches on so many things that are around us every day, and it evolves. The genre evolves based on the world around us. So back to the pandemic, I don't know if you watched Host. It's on Shudder, but it was a like they conducted these girls, all these friends did a virtual Zoom. Literally had part in the movie. It was so brilliant, and did a virtual séance. And of course, as you can imagine, chaos ensues, and these crazy things start happening around them. It's fantastic. It's really good. It's very scary. But what I love about it is that these filmmakers and these horror writers are so quick to like take the horrors that we're actually facing in the world around us and jumping into the genre and building a complete movie and storyline behind it. And I know there's been a lot of movies pertaining to social media, like, oh, I think Unfriended, I've never seen, but that is one, or like the found footage even. Those are big ones too. There's movies where people pretend to put on fake exorcisms to get clout on social media. Something that in the 80s nobody would even know what that meant, but horror is able to sort of evolve today. So I think that we feel connected to the genre too, which also helps us when we're looking for comfort or looking to sort of understand the world around us. They're creating, art from life. So that has always sort of resonated with me. It's one of the few genres I think that can really master that in such like a beautiful way and really make us understand like what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like, so it's a way to like take the anxieties that we're having kind of collectively, like whatever's most like our biggest collective fears today. And then it's able to
Yeah.
turn it into a movie so that we can kind of confront it, but like in a safer way where we're like, if it gets too much, I can pause it or turn it off if I need to. But or it feels at least unreal enough that it's like there's that remove so you can confront it without feeling overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, that's such a great point because very few times in life can we push the pause button when we are feeling overwhelmed or anxious. sometimes we just have to kind of ride through it. So it is nice to be able to say, oh, I don't actually have to finish watching this, or I can come back to it, or mute it even. Sometimes it's just the audio kind of perpetuates that fear, whatever it is that you need to do to sort of offset that. That's a really good point. Another thing too about, at least for me, I don't know how when your love for horror began, because mine began as a child. And I think that too is why I gravitate towards it today. It has that nostalgic feeling for me. I always had great memories. I had this best friend across the street that every Friday her mom would drive us to Blockbuster. Absolutely dating myself now. And we would just pick out a random horror movie. We would take a look at what the picture was like, on the box back in the day, pre-Netflix. And we would just watch these movies. And that's how I stumbled upon and found all these amazing cult classics that we love today. I think that there's sort of like a sense of nostalgia too, because I think back to those Friday nights when, you're 12 years old and you're not really worried about life. And there's a comfort in that. There's probably more to it from a therapeutic perspective. But do you feel the same way? Are there any specific movies that call out to you that you loved as a kid and sort of stuck that with you today?
So yeah, it's the exact same for me. I got started because I would like sneak out of bed at night and put like the late night horror movies on TV. And that would be like,
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street and like the whole Halloween movies. So I had
Yep.
all these, I grew up with all those because it would just be like, the classic old ones that they could play late night. And then I went to Blockbuster with my dad. It was like our weekend tradition to pick a movie, and also based on the box, because you can't like Google it real quick or like check the
Right.
description. It's just like, there's a troll in that box. Let's do that one.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then,
There's no IMDb, so you're no Rotten Tomatoes back in our day. We just took a look at the artwork, and that was our deciding factor.
so yeah, that's how I got to Evil Dead was a
Oh yeah. Oh
Blockbuster.
well,
And that's,
and that's classic. Yeah.
yeah.
I too, of course, loved those nostalgic movies and Halloween. And what I like about today, so what are your thoughts on so many of the reimagined coming back? We had Halloween in 2008, there's a
Mhm.
new trilogy series, and Scream came out in January, and they had announced that next March they'll be coming out with a sixth. How do you feel as somebody who sort of grew up as younger with this in our generation, and now as an adult, you and I, how do you feel about them kind of taking them on? Is it from your perspective, how do you feel about it? Do you like it?
I am enjoying it, to be honest. I recently watched the new Halloween, the two that are out so far, and I thought they did a really good like adaptation, or I guess sequel. Yeah.
Yep.
So I've just finished like a slasher marathon with my boyfriend, making him watch all of them. So it's like all blurring in my head. But loved the new Scream too, and the new Texas Chainsaw. I thought it
Yep.
was I thought it did a good job of like sticking thematically to the original. And I liked what they did with Sally, even though I don't think a lot of people appreciated that.
I was gonna say, well, I will say that I thought the kills were so amazing. Like that, the way
Beautifully
everything
done.
was shot, I thought it was really, really unique. And yeah, spoilers, but if you haven't watched it, too bad. Killing a final girl was kind of interesting to me because she had this legacy and she had this vengeance in her, and she was going after Leatherface, and she dies, and that was kind of shocking in a way. But I liked it. I thought eventually they have to die, and the way that they did it, I think that they gave her character justice at least.
That's what I thought too. It was a huge risk to do that because you're taking like a legacy character from a very iconic movie and then
Yep.
killing her. But they didn't do it
Yeah.
like they didn't just like kill her off. Like she had it like fit the storyline she had, and she still had like that heroic kind of death. So
Yeah, it was a pretty badass death. So I will say, if you're gonna go, she went she went in a kind of a cool way. But yeah, I love too. I agree with you completely, hands down. I love that they're doing these sequels, and I thought both Halloween and Scream were fantastic. I honestly truly love them, especially Halloween. Halloween's my favorite horror movie of all time. It's kind of what got me into horror. Back to what you were saying, kind of turning on the TV and seeing these Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween was always on. That was a go-to that we would always rent. And Michael Myers just always freaked me out, even as a kid, because he had no motive. He had nothing. He was just this guy who, for whatever reason, fixated on Laurie Strode and killed her friends at night and went after her. And that's so real. It's so realistic. It's so simplistic. Especially as women, we face that every day. There's always a hint of worry when we walk out of our front doors every day. So for me, immediately as a kid, I thought it was terrifying, just the concept and the white mask and just the black jumpsuit. I mean, everything was just so simple and it worked so well. So I loved that they brought back a kind of a new storyline for 2018. I loved Kills. There's a lot of flack about it. I don't know why. I thought it was fantastic. I'm really excited for Ends. And I think it's just really, again, kind of going off of how horror can continue to evolve. I know there are a ton of movies in other genres that do the same thing, like Mission Impossible, and there's so many movies that continue, but there's something about horror that can do it so differently and come up with a different result. You don't necessarily need the same characters. In fact, you don't really have too many of the same in the new Halloween movies. You just have Jamie Lee Curtis. She has a new daughter. There's a lot of new, and it works. It's the same story, but it works. So I'm really excited for what's to come with these movies and any of the others from back in the day that decide they want to sort of capitalize on what's happening right now. I think it's awesome.
Same. I agree. I feel like it's bringing it back for like the next generation, because it's like they might not go back and watch these old 80s movies, but maybe now they will because there's this reboot that came out.
Oh yeah, completely. And then you're getting the streaming services like Netflix and Peacock to care about them and stream them and show them. So I completely agree with you. I have a feeling though horror will definitely not be a genre. I think with the classics we love that people will sleep on. I think sort of similar today, Night of the Living Dead, and all of those movies still resonate with us. Frankenstein, we still watch them. We still know them. I was thinking about that too, specifically with Frankenstein and Dracula, Frankenstein was written, and I think in the late 1800s. Mary Shelley wrote that. And today you could go up to a 5-year-old and ask, do you know who Frankenstein is? And I'm pretty sure they would know who Frankenstein is. So it's so incredible how that can just continue on without any doubt, without any pause. You know that children still know exactly who that is. So yeah, that's why I love horror. It's so perfect.
I agree. I just want them to bring back Nightmare on Elm Street now.
I was going to say that because the remake that came out, I think like 2010, didn't love. So I would definitely love to see that one picked up and done right.
I agree.
Even without Wes, but Scream did they paid tribute to him beautifully in the new remake, so there's hope. There's hope one day. We'll see. If anyone is listening that wants to, as part of Hollywood, we definitely advocate for Nightmare on Elm Street.
Please do it. You will have 2 mean people in the audience at least.
Oh yeah, multiple times, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for making me not have to do an episode by myself and talk to myself, which is very awkward. It was really nice to have another human talk to me about horror and how much they love it. It's, our little community of weirdos, and I love it so much. So thank you so much again for your time. Keep writing those articles because they are fantastic and I love reading them, and I look forward to what's next.
Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me talk about horror.
Anytime, please. There's plenty of conversation, so this will be first of many.
I will be happy to come back anytime.
This has been great, and thanks for listening, and more to come soon.